Bill Spencer stared in disbelief at his son Liam, lying motionless on the floor of his luxurious office, the weight of his body pressing into the hardwood as though gravity itself had abandoned him. Time seemed to slow as his heart raced, his eyes unable to tear themselves away from the sight. Liam's chest no longer rose and fell with the rhythm of life. He was still, so unnaturally still. There was a coldness in the room, an eerie silence that seemed to suffocate every living thing within it. Bill's voice, trembling with a fear that he hadn't felt in years, broke the silence. "Liam." His voice cracked as he rushed toward his son, panic overtaking his every rational thought. Bill's heart pounded in his chest as he knelt beside Liam. He placed his hands on Liam's chest, desperately trying to revive him, but his efforts were in vain. Liam's face was pale, his once lively eyes now vacant. The world outside the Spencer Tower seemed to vanish, leaving Bill trapped in a nightmare of his own making. He reached for his phone with trembling hands, his fingers shaking as he dialed the emergency number. "Liam, my son, please." His voice was barely a whisper as he choked on the words, the grief sinking in with every second that passed. The response on the other end of the line was immediate. "What's happened, Mr. Spencer?" The operator asked, her tone professional but laced with a hint of concern. Bill, barely able to compose himself, barked, "Send an ambulance, now." His voice was frantic, his words spilling out in a rush. "It's Liam. Something's wrong. He's not breathing." The operator confirmed the details, but Bill didn't wait for the ambulance. He couldn't. The seconds felt like hours as he continued to try and wake his son, shaking him gently, calling his name over and over again, but the stillness never wavered. The weight of the moment pressed on him, suffocating him, and for the first time in a long time, Bill Spencer felt helpless. It wasn't long before the medical team arrived, rushing into the room with urgency. They moved swiftly, taking Liam's body into their hands, performing CPR, trying to revive him, but Bill knew in his gut that it was too late. He could see it in their faces, the resignation, the quiet acceptance that they couldn't bring Liam back. Finally, one of the doctors stood, looking at Bill with a grave expression. "I'm sorry, Mr. Spencer," she said softly, her voice betraying her own sadness. "There's nothing we can do." Bill's world tilted on its axis. He stared at the doctor, unable to comprehend the words that had just been spoken. No, you're wrong. There has to be something you can do, please." His voice cracked, the raw emotion tearing through him. "I can't lose him, not like this." The doctor gently shook her head. "It's too late. I'm sorry. Liam, he passed away due to poisoning. His organs, his stomach, everything has been affected by prolonged exposure to a substance." Bill's breath caught in his throat, a chill crawling down his spine. "Poisoning," he whispered, his mind racing to make sense of the impossible reality in front of him. As the doctor explained, the devastating truth began to unfold. Liam had been ingesting counterfeit medication for months, a fact that had remained hidden from Bill and everyone else. The fake drugs had slowly, insidiously, taken their toll on Liam's body. The toxins had ravaged his organs, his liver, and his stomach, until it was too late to reverse the damage. Bill was left standing in shock, his body rooted to the spot, his mind unable to process the words. How could this have happened? How had no one noticed? The pieces began to fall into place, but they only deepened the mystery. The fake medication had been expertly concealed, passed off as legitimate, but Bill couldn't fathom how it had slipped through the cracks. Who had done this to his son? Who was responsible for this unthinkable act of cruelty? The questions swirled in his mind, each one more agonizing than the last. The man who had been Liam's closest ally, the one who had always stood by him, suddenly felt a universe away. This wasn't the world Bill knew. This was a new, darker reality where his son was dead, and there was no explanation that could bring him back. The guilt began to consume Bill, gnawing at him like an insatiable beast. He thought about the moments when he had been too caught up in his business dealings to spend time with his son, when Liam had needed him the most. He thought about the times he'd pushed Liam too hard, tried to force him into a mold that didn't fit, always expecting more, never truly seeing the person Liam had become. Bill's mind spiraled into self-blame, but there was no time to dwell on that now. He had to find out who had done this. He had to make them pay. The police arrived shortly after, and Bill was left standing in the middle of the room, his thoughts racing, trying to make sense of the chaos that had just engulfed his life. He spoke to the officers, explaining what had happened, recounting the events leading up to this tragic moment, but even he could barely comprehend it. His words seemed hollow, meaningless, as if speaking the truth out loud would somehow make it more real. Days passed in a blur of grief and confusion. Bill, unable to function, locked himself away in his office, staring at the empty space where Liam had once stood. The company, the business he had worked so hard to build, seemed irrelevant now. Nothing mattered anymore. He had lost Liam, and nothing could ever replace him. As the investigation into Liam's death began to unfold, a chilling truth emerged. The counterfeit drugs had been deliberately placed into Liam's hands, and Bill's worst fears were confirmed. This wasn't an accident. This had been orchestrated. Someone had wanted Liam dead. Someone had been watching, waiting for the right moment to strike. But who? The investigation led to a tangled web of lies, deceit, and betrayal. Bill's mind whirled as he realized that the people he trusted most might have been involved. Could it have been someone from within his own company? Or was there someone else out there, a shadowy figure, pulling the strings behind the scenes? Bill wasn't sure, but one thing was certain. He would stop at nothing to find out. The pain of losing Liam, the guilt of not having protected him, the anger of being blindsided by an enemy he couldn't even name, it all began to fuel something inside Bill. His grief would drive him, but it would also change him. There would be no turning back. The man who had once been feared for his power, his ruthlessness, would now become something else entirely, a father driven by vengeance. No one would get away with this. As the investigation intensified and more clues came to light, Bill began to realize that the conspiracy against his son ran deeper than he could have ever imagined. People he thought he could trust, people who had smiled in his face, were now revealed to be part of this deadly game. And all of it pointed to one thing: someone wanted Bill Spencer to suffer. But Bill wouldn't let it stand. With every ounce of his being, he would uncover the truth. And when he did, he would make sure that the ones responsible would pay with everything they had. This was far from over. This was just the beginning of a dark and twisted revenge that would change the Spencer family forever. The Forrester family's world was already teetering on the edge of chaos. Amid the latest triumphs and struggles of Forrester Creations, there was a new storm brewing, a storm centered around a woman whose loyalty was only to herself, Grace Buckingham. Her quiet presence in Los Angeles had hidden a deeper agenda, one that would shake the family to its core and leave John Finn Finnegan at the center of a web of deceit. Finn had always been a man of integrity, committed to the truth and to those he loved, especially his wife, Steffi Forrester. But as he started to peel back the layers of Grace's manipulation, he found himself caught in a dangerous game of blackmail and lies, a game that could change everything. It started innocently enough. Grace had been helping Finn with a series of fake medical diagnoses, pretending to be a trusted medical professional when she wasn't. But the cracks began to show when Finn noticed things that didn't quite add up. The symptoms, which had once seemed so plausible, began to get worse. Liam Spencer, who had been treated by Grace under the guise of a rare condition, was now feeling the worst of it. But there was something off about the whole situation. Finn had started to question the legitimacy of the diagnosis. Things didn't align with what he knew about medical practices. As his suspicions grew, he began piecing together the inconsistencies, and that's when he realized the truth. Grace had orchestrated the entire thing. The fake tumor. The elaborate medical charade designed to manipulate not just Liam, but also Bill Spencer. Grace's motivations weren't difficult to deduce. She had an agenda. A $1 million agenda. She had been working with Bill Spencer, promising him that Liam would make a miraculous recovery once she had the financial backing to cover her treatments. It was a carefully constructed scam, and Bill had unknowingly played right into her hands. She had planned to take the money and run, disappearing into the shadows once she had what she wanted. But Finn was no fool, and when he started connecting the dots, he realized that Grace's plan wasn't just a medical fraud. It was an act of criminal manipulation that had gone far beyond the boundaries of ethics. The deeper Finn delved into Grace's schemes, the more he discovered. The more he uncovered, the more he began to suspect that Grace was hiding something far worse than just a fake medical diagnosis. There was a layer to her story that didn't add up, something about Luna Nozawa. Finn had always known that Luna's situation was mysterious, but as he dug deeper, he uncovered the truth. His mother, Lee Finnegan, had orchestrated Luna's death. It wasn't a simple case of mistaken identity or medical malpractice. It was a deliberate act of deception. Lee had falsified Luna's death certificate and secretly had her taken out of the hospital, hiding her from everyone. Finn was shaken. He'd always been proud of his mother, but this revelation about her part in hiding Luna's life, or rather, her existence, brought everything into question. How could Lee be involved in something so underhanded? And how could Grace possibly know about it? That's when Finn began to understand just how dangerous Grace had become. She wasn't just using him and Liam as pawns in a scheme for money. She was playing a deeper game of manipulation, one that tied back to his own family. The moment of truth came when Finn confronted Grace. It was late one evening, after the family had gathered for what was supposed to be a peaceful dinner. Finn's anger had reached its boiling point. His suspicions had been confirmed, and now, with the weight of everything crashing down on him, he confronted her directly in the Forrester Mansion study. "You've been lying to me, Grace." Finn's voice was cold, filled with betrayal. The tumor. The diagnosis. It was all a scam, wasn't it? Grace stood across from him, a faint smile playing on her lips. "You're smarter than I gave you credit for," she said, her voice oozing with false sweetness. "But you have no idea how deep this runs. This isn't just about you, Finn. This is about survival. And if you want to keep your family safe, you'll keep your mouth shut." Finn's hands clenched into fists. "You're not going to get away with this. I'll make sure of it." Grace's eyes darkened. "You think you can stop me? You're the one with something to lose now, Finn. You think I don't know about Lee and Luna? You think I don't know the truth about how your mother faked Luna's death?" The words hit Finn like a punch to the gut. "What do you mean?" he asked, his voice trembling with a mixture of shock and disbelief. Grace stepped closer, her voice lowering, filled with venom. "Your mother has broken every rule, Finn. She's not the woman you think she is. And if you go to the authorities, if you even think about exposing me, I'll make sure the world knows about her crimes. The fake death. The cover-up. The lies. I'll make sure Luna's story is known, and I'll make sure your mother goes down with me." Finn's heart raced. He felt trapped, his every instinct screaming at him to confront Grace, to expose the truth. But the threat to his mother, to Luna, was too great. He couldn't let his family fall apart, not like this. The weight of the decision pressed down on him. "You wouldn't," Finn said, though the doubt in his voice betrayed him. Grace smiled. "I would. And you know what? I think you'll see it my way. If you want your family to stay intact, if you want to keep your mother out of prison, then you'll stay quiet. You'll keep this secret. And you'll let me walk away with what I deserve." Finn's mind raced. He couldn't stand the thought of being blackmailed, of having his entire life controlled by Grace Buckingham. But at the same time, the threat to his mother and Luna was real. His love for Steffi, for his family, was stronger than his need to bring justice. For the first time in his life, Finn felt completely powerless. I'm not going to let you get away with this, Finn finally spat, his voice steady despite the turmoil inside. Grace's smirk widened. You'll keep quiet. You don't have a choice. With that, she turned and walked out of the room, leaving Finn standing there in the wake of his decision. He had no idea how long he could keep this secret, how long he could bear to live with the knowledge that he was enabling Grace to continue her manipulation. But as she had warned him, he had a lot to lose: his family, his career, and the woman he loved, Steffi. Days passed, and Finn's silence weighed heavily on him. But it wasn't just the blackmail he was struggling with. As the situation grew more intense, Finn began to experience unsettling symptoms of his own. Headaches, dizziness, and strange sensations. He chalked it up to the stress of everything, but deep down, he feared that his own health was deteriorating, much like Liam's had. It wasn't until he underwent a medical checkup that the truth came out. He had a mild form of the same autoimmune disorder Grace had faked for Liam. The discovery only deepened his dread, knowing that Grace had knowingly drugged him to make his symptoms worse. In the weeks that followed, Grace's power over Finn remained, but the tension in his relationship with Steffi grew. He couldn't tell her the truth, not without exposing his family's darkest secrets. But the weight of the lies began to erode his marriage, and Steffi's trust in him began to crack. As Finn struggled to navigate his guilt, Grace's grip tightened, and the situation threatened to spiral out of control. In the shadows, another dark truth loomed. Grace had orchestrated everything. Manipulating Liam, using Finn as a pawn, and keeping her secrets locked away. And Finn knew that unless he found a way to stop her, unless he found the courage to expose her, he would be forced to carry the weight of her lies for the rest of his life. But the question remained: how long could he protect his family before the walls came crashing down?